Do you really wanna hurt me? Do you really wanna make me cry? So yeah, so you can guess what I'm talking about today. And it's Boy George and his transphobic comments on Twitter. Now, Boy George has come into the news over the last couple of days because he put out a tweet which was basically kind of belittling transgender rights. And the tweet actually said, leave your pronouns at the door. Now, and I mean, incidentally, George, there is no need for an apostrophe in between the N and the S of pronouns because it's not actually, you know, kind of in front of anything like possessive, whatever. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, so Boy George basically has a track record of this, and he upset a lot of people on Twitter, particularly non-binary people. Um, he he also then went on to compound the problem a few days later by condemning people who asked to use to use the correct pronouns as for people as attention seeking. Um, so he kind of made matters much worse. Um, but he has a history of this, and how do I know? Because back a couple of years ago, when I had a Twitter account, I was actually one of the many people that Boy George has monstered. I mean, I think it was something to do with him going on about transgender girls being allowed to wear skirts at one particular school, and also non-binary people being sort of the school putting out a message that said that non-binary pupils were welcome at this school and the school would use the correct pronouns. And George actually said, oh, well, it's not. Why do you have to be transgender to wear a skirt? What most women wear trousers or something like that, which kind of like totally missed the point, really, because nobody's saying that you have to wear a skirt to be a woman. The school was just saying that they wanted to support their transgender pupils by letting them know that they can wear a skirt and letting the non-binary pupils know that the school will do their best to use the correct pronouns. But George has been he's been really sort of at best lukewarm, at worst completely hostile to the idea of trans rights, and he said all kinds of stuff, not overtly hostile towards trans people, but it's kind of like mocking, snide remarks. He put something on back a couple of months ago. He said, "Oh, I'm glad that non-binary has been added to the Oxford English Dictionary. Perhaps it's the same as non. It's a bit like non-stick." And he's also gone on about labels as well, and yeah, and I was actually, yeah, I was one of the people who were monstered by Boy George a couple of years back, and he basically called me dull, and I don't think my comment was really that controversial. I mean, all I was saying was, why can't people, especially powerful cis people in a high-profile position like him, why can't they just kind of agree to treat trans people with the same equality and respect that they treat cis people, and move on? And for some reason, this seems to have struck a raw nerve with George, because he actually retweeted my reply to him, and then obviously followed the inevitable dog pile of his fans, and he's also emboldened gender critical transphobes as well, basically, TERFs in other words. So yeah, so I mean, I just, I just can't understand why he's so hostile towards trans rights. It's almost as if he's saying, oh, well, you don't need to be trans, you can just be like me, a gender non-conforming cis person. But we're not saying that people can't be gender non-conforming like him, and people were all for him before he started mouthing off about trans people and saying that, and actually emboldening TERFs and people like that to attack us. I mean, where was he in the 80s when people were getting fired from their jobs for being trans, or being where trans boys were forced to dress as girls, or trans girls were forced to dress as boys, and have their hair cut and stuff because of stupid school rules, and also like rules in the workplace as well. They had dress codes, where where you just couldn't be feminine, if you were trans, you had to conform to either or. And also as well, I heard a lot of stories about people who were fired as soon as they told their workplaces that they were trans. And I was fired for being trans from one of my jobs. But these people like Boy George, if they were such good advocates for transgender rights, then back in those days, well, why did they remain completely silent about all that going on? And all of a sudden now, they're up in arms at the slightest little thing like being called cis. I mean, Alison Moyet actually blew a fuse a couple of years ago because she hated the word cis, and then she went on a whole rant. And also Mark Almond as well, another kind of sort of what they would call gender bending 80s sort of pop star. He kind of went on about trans people. I can't remember what he said, but it's always these snide remarks, and kind of, I don't really understand where they're coming from, because all trans people want to do is just live our lives, and we just want the same equality and respect that they have. And these people are speaking from very privileged positions. So yeah, he did. Boy George monstered me. He called me dull. He said I was very dull, or perhaps I am dull, but it's a strange kind of reaction, really, to me just saying, well, why can't you just treat trans people the way you treat cis people, with respect and equality and decently? Um, so yeah, I think a lot of these 80s stars seem to think that they invented gender bending. They are the ultimate. Sorry, only gender bending. I mean, they seem to think that they invented gender nonconformity, gender bending, and they think that trans people are somehow unnecessary. Um, and you can be trans and be gender non-conforming. You can be cis and be gender non-conforming. Gender non-conformity is completely independent of whether you're trans or not. The same as sexuality is completely independent of whether you're trans. You can be a gay trans person, you can be a straight trans person, and you can be a bi trans person, or you can be asexual and not interested in sex at all. So yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's really tempting to kind of turn around and sort of like say to George, okay, boomer, I mean, because even though I don't like to kind of pigeonhole people by their age, I mean, he's kind of like looking back at the 80s and seeing some kind of idyllic sort of era where you could be who you wanted to be. But that only really applied to people like him who were celebrities. I know, and rich. I know he had to put up with a lot of rubbish particularly from the tabloids, and from the media about being sort of feminine, and wearing makeup and having long hair and stuff. And but yeah, but that's not our fault. If he had to put up with it and he identified as a cisgender male, what about trans people? How does he think the trans people had what does he think we had to put up with in those days? And how does he think that trans people, trans children at school were suffering? at that time. He really, I mean, it really is disingenuous of him for him to come out with all these kind of unhelpful comments, and it just buys into the day-to-day mockery of trans people, and also particularly non-binary people, that we see in the media and on the streets as well. Because there's actually been, last year there was an 81% rise in transgender hate crime, and part of it, I'm sure, is due to some of these bigots and harassers and bullies feeling emboldened by the media establishment, and the rise of right-wing politicians like Donald Trump and Boris Johnson, Bolsonaro in Brazil. I mean, it's, you know, there's been a frightening resurgence of the far right, and they're actually using mockery of transgender people, and, you know, to not only delegitimize trans people, but also to kind of use as a kind of Trojan horse to, you know, make their way into mainstream politics. And sadly, it's working, you know. So yeah. So yeah, Boy George, I think you should just chill out. And did you really want to hurt me? Did you really want to make me cry? Well, actually, it didn't work, because I'm here and I'm still standing and I'm not going to go away. Um, Trans people are not going to go back into the closet. It's not the 80s anymore. And we should never, trans people should never have been put through all the crap that we've been put through over the years, you know? So please, you know, just kind of take a look at what you're doing, you know, and dogpiling onto smaller people on Twitter is kind of quite bullying, really, because you're a big star and you have a sense of, you should have a sense of responsibility, because you could push somebody over the edge. Because if your fans get involved and they start picking on one person and dogpiling on them, then that's going to be overwhelming for a lot of people, and they could end up doing something silly, like harming themselves, you know, because a lot of trans people are not in a good place already because of all the kind of crap we've had to put up with from society, and, you know, all the sort of issues we have around self-esteem and that kind of thing. So yeah, so please, you know, don't stop punching down, you know, because you are responsible. You're in a position of power, but with power comes responsibility. And unfortunately, I think all too many people don't seem to take that on board. So yeah. So that's what I have to say for now, and I will say goodbye to you all, and see you next time. Cheerio, thank you for watching. Please let me know if you have any um, comments on this, you know, whether you think Boy George has been unfairly demonized, or you think trans people have been unfairly demonized by Boy George. I, you know, I'd really be keen to hear what you have to think about this, you know. Thank you for watching, and I love you all. Cheerio. Bye bye.